Hi, welcome back to my channel. I've given a lot of attention to the Bible, um, too much, because there is a great knowledge of God to be found amongst many scriptures of different faiths and traditions. And it's for that reason that I would like to make a video dedicated to exploring some concepts in what is called the Bhagavad Gita. Some of you may know what the Bhagavad Gita is. I have the translation here. It's probably backwards on the screen, but it's called Bhagavad Gita as it is. And it was translated by a spiritual master named Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Prabhupada is probably his more commonly known name, but he's the one that founded the Society for Krishna Consciousness, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, otherwise known by its acronym as ISKCON. There's a whole story that's very interesting and respectable as far as how Prabhupada brought these teachings of Indian tradition to the United States and how the movement came about here. It was back in the 60s and before. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada adds, after every verse, it's written in Sanskrit, which is an ancient language of the Indian subcontinent. The entire Bhagavad Gita and many other texts of Hinduism are written in Sanskrit. But Prabhupada translates the actual Sanskrit text, which you can see in any copy of the ISKCON book. Following the literal translation of the Sanskrit, Prabhupada adds what's called purports, which are basically, which are basically long commentaries after every verse, describing the surrounding context of the verse or the backstory. And he provides a lot of good insight as also to the meaning of the verses. A quick overview of Hinduism would be appropriate for the context of the Bhagavad Gita, for those who do not know. In Hinduism, there is basically many sects. There are many traditions in the religion of Hinduism itself. It's not one. It isn't one. What's the word? Homogeneous, whatever. It's not one solid tradition. Hinduism isn't. It actually has a lot of subsections where there are literally millions, I think, of gods and deities, but the spiritual focus of devotees between all these different gods and stuff varies, and in certain sects of Hinduism, as a result of extreme devotion to certain deities, actually is more monotheistic more than it is polytheistic, which is I think a big misunderstanding. Because when we imagine Hinduism in the West, a lot of times we imagine it to be, a bunch of gods. Everyone's devoted to like a handful of gods and stuff, but certain traditions within Hinduism actually are monotheistic in the sense that there is one supreme god or godhead, and all of the divinities, all the demigods that surround this godhead are subordinate and lesser. So at least that was an understanding that I had before I became exposed to the truth of the reality. But I mean, of course, there are some polytheistic Hindus, but a lot of uh, it is monotheistic. Um, Prabhupada in particular was a branch of Hinduism. He came from a branch of Hinduism which emphasized and worshipped the one supreme being as Vishnu. Not that other gods weren't recognized, but that Vishnu, the supreme being, was seen as number one, and all others are subordinate. And this person named Krishna was seen as like the living incarnation of Vishnu, one of the incarnations of Vishnu, who came to the earth and actually lived as a man, and taught things much in a similar way to how Christians view Jesus, and that he was God incarnated. But Krishna came to India and he taught many things, and he ruled as a king at one time, and he had a very eventful, dramatic life and existence. But one of the teachings of Krishna was recorded by a follower, and it describes a certain battle that took place during the life of Krishna, and we're talking like the thousands BC, so a long time ago this took place. And the Bhagavad Gita is that event surrounding the battle. I mean, you can do your own research on all this. There's so many resources out there. I would highly encourage anyone to look into the story of Krishna, the story of surrounding the Bhagavad Gita and the context. Very interesting history. It's very educational. But for our purposes, I just wanted to give kind of an overview. So Krishna, or Lord Krishna, is seen as the incarnation of Vishnu, or God. He is the one that speaks to a guy named Arjuna, and Arjuna is like a warrior in this great battle that took place. And the Bhagavad Gita is that teaching that Krishna gave to Arjuna in writing. So, that all being said, I wanted to just pick a verse that I thought reflected much of God's truth. And this verse comes from chapter 7, and it is, I believe it's known as text 26. So chapter 7, verse or text 26. What it actually says is, "O Arjuna," this is Krishna speaking, "as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows." This verse stuck out to me immediately for the reason that the way that I read it, especially that last part where Krishna says, "I also know all living entities, but me no one knows." When you know something, you almost possess that something in your mind with the limits of your own knowledge. So, I know a scientific fact or a historical fact, let's say. I know that water boils at a certain temperature. I know that if I drop something, gravity will make it fall. I know that if I go so fast, my car will shudder and its engine will stop. There's all these things that you can know. You can know your pets. You can know frickin' anything. But in knowledge, what it means to know something is to almost possess it or hold on to it with the capacity of your knowledge. It's a container, like a container would contain liquid. So in a very um, uh, rudimentary sense, this cup knows this liquid because this liquid is contained within this cup. So this cup, if it were a conscious mind, I mean, if we can imagine that, the liquid inside is the knowledge. So the cup knows the liquid. It's able to possess it. And I think in this verse when Krishna says, I know all living entities, I mean, he just got done saying he knows the past, present, future also. But I also know all living entities, but me no one knows. What I take that to mean is kind of like no one possesses the supreme personality of Godhead or God. No one possesses God, but God possesses all things, so to speak, with knowledge. And I think it kind of relates, though, not just to the awesome nature of God and how great and all-encompassing God is, for the sake of humility to recognize that. It also relates to how devotion to God is sufficient. You don't have to possess the full knowledge of God in order to love God or be devoted to God. You don't have to know everything in order to love. You know, you don't have to understand the mysteries of God in order to follow God. And that's really like what this reminds me of. I'll actually go ahead and read some of the purport too, just to see what Prabhupada has to say about it. The attached purport begins like this. Here, the question of personality and impersonality is clearly stated. If Krishna, the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is considered by the impersonalist to be Maya, to be material, then he would, like the living entity, change his body and forget everything in his past life. Anyone with a material body cannot remember his past life, nor can he foretell his future life, nor can he predict the outcome of his present life. Therefore, he cannot know what is happening in past, present, and future. Unless one is liberated from material contamination, he cannot know past, present, and future. Unlike the ordinary human being, Lord Krishna clearly states that he completely knows what happened in the past, what is happening in the present, and what will happen in the future. In the 4th chapter, we have seen that Lord Krishna remembers instructing Vivasvan, am I saying that right? Vivasvan, the sun god, millions of years ago. Krishna knows every living entity because he is situated in every living being's heart as the Supreme Soul. But despite his presence in every living entity as Super Soul and his presence beyond the material sky as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the less intelligent cannot realize him as the Supreme Person. Certainly, the transcendental body of Sri Krishna is not perishable. He is just like the sun, and Maya is like the cloud. In the material world, we can see that there is sun and that there are clouds and different stars and planets. The clouds may cover all these in the sky temporarily, but this covering is only apparent to our limited vision. The sun, moon, and stars are not actually covered. Similarly, Maya cannot cover the Supreme Lord. By his internal potency, he is not manifest to the less intelligent class of men. As it is stated in the 3rd verse of this chapter, out of millions and millions of men, some try to become perfect in this human form of life, and out of thousands and thousands of such perfected men, hardly one can understand what Lord Krishna is. Even if one is perfected by realization of impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma, he cannot possibly understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, without being in Krishna consciousness. So there was a lot there. Maya, as I understand it, is illusion, and it sort of creates the distance that we feel between ourselves and God. And it's illusion for the reason that there is really no distance between ourselves and our Creator. Prabhupada just works to re-emphasize that Lord Krishna sits above the intelligence of ordinary men. I guess if you wanted to stretch it, it could mean a similar thing as what I was implying when I was talking about the vessel containing the liquid. We as ordinary beings who are immersed in this illusion called Maya, we can only possess so much, we can only see so far, unless we are in what is called Krishna consciousness or God consciousness. And with that, the Maya is lifted, and that we can actually come closer to knowing who God is and witnessing that. It's really good.